So what I plan to do today, if possible, is talk about a little bit about who we are and therefore justify why it's worth listening to us. Talk about why part of what we do, and not a big part, but an active part of what we do is surveys of the industry and why they are important or at least have some value and therefore why you may want to listen again. And then talk about two relatively recent projects, both of which are updated on a relatively annual basis or at least frequent basis, because I think one of the beauties of the surveys is you are able to track the changes over time. So not only do you get a current reading of the temperature, but you're able to see how that may be shifting or migrating in time. So I did want to talk some, our parent company is actually CHI. That's the conference company. It's the company that owns our company. It's the company that's spamming your inbox as we speak on a regular basis. They are very active, but they do well over 100 conferences a year, many of which I think are actually very applicable to this field. And then one of the things we did at CHA was decide that we really wanted to establish a community. You could call it a community of practice, but it's really more of a forum for expression of ideas, feedback, presentations, etc. When the community was first founded, there was a steering committee or an advisory board made up of heads of safety of pretty much all of the major pharmaceutical companies, and they decided that the committee would just be for members of pharma. It's something I never particularly appreciated, and I did want to say we've relaunched the website, so it's drugsafetycouncil.org, and we've relaunched the community, and now the membership is open to everybody who is interested in drug safety, in particular preclinical drug safety. So by all means, visit the new website, and if you haven't been a member, please join up. We're up to, I don't know, 2,500 members, but like I say, those are mostly pharma people now. But now, if you're a vendor or an academic or a regulatory person, any of the interested in drug safety, you're more than welcome to join and participate. And last but not least, membership is free. I think many of you know that I spent a long time at Roche, Hoffman LaRoche in Nutley, New Jersey. They were a great company to work for. And I became a member of this little group called Cambridge Health Tech Associates. Actually, at that time, it was Cambridge Health Tech Advisors, and really liked the vision they had. There was all these things we were doing one company at a time, and the question was, why? Why don't we actually try to solve these problems as a group? In theory, we could do it better. We have two heads are better than one, and there's so many of these pre-competitive things that really make sense to do as a group. So I left Roche and joined this little startup because I thought that vision and that approach was actually extremely valuable to the industry. And our fundamental goal is to improve the economics and effectiveness of preclinical safety evaluation through collaborations among all of the interested parties. So the question comes up, well, as we're doing this, trying to develop these collaborations and trying to assist in the evaluation and the promotion and the development of technologies that will impact on the effectiveness of preclinical safety evaluation, we do a fair amount of surveys, and I would be willing to bet that many of you in this room have at least received an invitation from us to participate in a survey or an interview. And I do get a fair amount of pushback from people, and the words go something like, well, just because everybody else is doing it doesn't mean I should do it. And I understand that. In fact, that's exactly not the reason why we do surveys. I really think surveys are one of the few ways that really allow you to understand what the current state of the art is, or at least best practices in the industry. And safety in particular is not a solo field. It's not something where you want to be out in front of the pack. Most people feel that that safety is kind of a consensus phenomenon. But we move the technology as we all move to a technology and adopt a technology as we all become convinced that that technology is actually value added and actually addressing a specific need or needs in the industry. So by doing surveys, we are able to get the temperature around what is the enthusiasm, what is the current judgment as to the predictability, shall we say, in the field. And like I say, it does give us that stamp of approval. And obviously then it also shows where there's interest, where there's curiosity, where there's holes in our current approaches that should be addressed. So I do think there is a useful place for surveys, and I hope to, through these next two examples, demonstrate to you where that utility lies. So really, I think it was at least 4 years ago, we were asked a question by a pharma company, actually, what is the best practices in pre-GLP safety assessment or discovery toxicology, as was presented earlier. And particularly, is there things that are being done that we don't do? That was this one company's question. But for us, it was actually said, ooh, well, I like this idea because it gives us an opportunity to actually do that, to actually set out and define what I'm going to call in the rest of this talk best practice in early or discovery safety assessment. And our evaluations tend to follow a fairly common format. First, we do a series of interviews. In this case, I think we did 10 or 12 interviews of thought leaders and experts in the field, all at pharma companies, all currently engaged in early safety assessment. And that gives us sort of a framework then on which to build and an environment on which to build a survey, a broad-based survey that then we go out to the whole DSEC community and ask for their opinions. And so we first use the in-person interviews to really get a feel for whatever area we're evaluating, and then we use the in-depth survey to really get quantitative in our evaluations. And I don't expect this necessarily for you to, and of course this is a great thing to discuss over a beer in the tavern. I'm not sure we really want to get into it now, but this initial list came about, I think was finalized about 3 years ago based on input of about 100 practitioners in the field. And we defined a best practice as something that was done routinely at pharma companies pre-GLP at least 55% of the time. And you can see, if you just look down the list, this was the percentage on your right is what percentage of companies, or percentage of, actually it's more precisely, what percentage of molecules on average from the survey responses do they do this type of assessment pre-GLP. And as you can see, physical chemical property prediction is done at a large percentage. Almost everybody does something like pKa estimation in silico nowadays. They probably do measure it or log P or whatnot, but there's really a very broad acceptance of these physical chemical properties as either being useful or at least being available in the field. I thought some of the other things, and of course genotox, the mini-aims, that's been broadly done for a number of years. There's no surprises. Off-target assays, I was surprised to see it was quite that high. That the majority of companies are using off-target assessment a very high percentage of the time. The pilot tox studies, of course, that's no big surprise. The hERG inhibition studies, no big surprise. But I thought a couple of interesting things that I did want to point out, that telemetry was actually, even though 62%, I was surprised at how often telemetry is now appearing in these studies. Transporter binding inhibition assays came up with a pretty fair percentage of the time. And anyway, well, what can I say? This is, as of 2 years ago, was considered to be the best practices. Now, just literally in the past 2 weeks, we have sort of refreshed this and began interviews to see how much of this has changed. And I can tell you, not a lot, actually, with one exception, and we'll get to that later on. But I was going to point out, actually, because it'll come up again later, that toxin ADME prediction tools were used a surprisingly large percentage of the time. And of course, most of this is Derek. And this was really brought home to me at the most recent SOT. I was talking to a colleague, and he was saying he just finished up a pre-IND meeting at the agency, and the agency looked at their package, it looked at their chemistry pathway, and then the agency came to the pre-IND meeting having done a Derek analysis on all the starting materials and all of the intermediates. So they were using Derek analysis from the very beginning to guide their safety assessment from an agency perspective. I thought that was a real gee whiz insight into how the agency thinks about these tools. They're obviously putting a lot of credibility into these tool sets from a regulatory perspective. One of the questions we asked was, how would you characterize your pre-LT safety assessment? And we gave them some options like complete, meaning you run a broad spectrum, or selective, you only picked a few of the tests, etc. And about half people said they were selective, and they ran somewhere between 5 and 8 tests routinely in terms of these pre-GLP safety assessment tools. As I said, slightly more than that, actually, we're using the Derek, MCASE, and TopCat. I can tell you in the refresh we're doing on this right now, that percentage has jumped up a lot. I'll bet you it's over 75 or 80% now that people are using those tools very early on in their safety assessment. A small percent, this kind of surprised me, and frankly, I think this has actually decreased since we did this study. People were using these text mining tools to really explore the pharmacology or the safety. It's just something that doesn't seem to have really caught on in the way that I thought it might have. And even more to the point, these so-called systems toxicology tools that have been introduced probably in the past 3 years have not really been used to any significant extent yet on a routine basis, but we're going to talk about that again, so that's the reason why I brought it up. So these last 2 bullet points I also want to emphasize. So 88% of the people thought that their preclinical or discovery safety pharmacology efforts were making a big impact on the quality of their portfolio. But that was highly skewed. There were some organizations that really did not have a lot of confidence that their preclinical safety assessment was having a big impact. But the organizations that really did and were almost religious in their zeal for what preclinical safety was bringing to their lead optimization were those that had really put a lot of time and effort into developing informatics tools that allowed them to leverage the data. And I so much so that I think, and it seems pretty obvious with 20/20 hindsight, but at the time, so if you're really going to do a lot of preclinical safety testing, what the data is suggesting, you need to have good informatics tools in order to really leverage that data for improved decision making. You need to have some kind of system in place to allow you to put it in perspective, not just the scientific or how it rates worth to its colleagues, but a biological or in vivo perspective with the predictive, the PBPK modeling, because just having a result in and of itself, and even in perspective, doesn't really mean a lot till you know what the concentration or the presence is at the active site. And I really think that's the next step. So the other thing we do is every year for probably going on 5 years now, maybe even 6, is do what we call a toxicology assessment survey to really look at, and really it's to ask the question, in the past year, what did you do to evaluate new technology? What areas did you look at? What areas you found interesting? And then looking forward, what are you going to do this year? And I would like to talk some about the 2011 results, normally we have this done by the SOT. It's something we take to the SOT, but 2012 is kind of an interesting year, and again, I'll talk a little bit what's changed in 2012 that has caused us to adjust our paradigm a little bit. But the 2011 results, which are about a year old now, that was really, I think, these three categories, to some extent it's not surprising, but on the other hand it was reassuring to me, that really stood out. And that was when we asked the people, what was either your number one thing you evaluated last year or are planning to evaluate this year, and these are the three areas that came out on top. And normally, again, we actually provide a list of options. I think we outline in the survey 22 or 23 different technologies that we know are of interest, and then ask them of those technologies or any others, what is their interest level. And by far and away, the number one was high content toxicology assessment. And I was a bit amazed that it continues to be one of the top areas almost every year since we've done the survey. We first did the survey right after we did the work with the tool that you came out, Salumin, and Salumin had done a nice job of, I think, shall we say, garnering support for a recent trend. There was the publication from Pfizer or whatnot, and they really tried to leverage that. And ever since then, it's clearly been a major area that people are looking at. It didn't show up on the original best practices list, but I'm pretty sure, based on the interviews we've done so far, that it would show up this year. That I think it appears to me that well over 55% of people are using high content screening of some profile of cell health parameters. One of the things that I do think it's still a little probably needs a little normalization is what is the profiles, what are the time frame, what are the cells you should be evaluating. There's still a lot of diversity in how high content assessment is done in preclinical safety, but the fact that it's done at so many companies, such a high or an increasingly percentage of the time on a routine basis, I think is telling us something about the level of acceptance and the value of that tool. And of course, mechanistic or predictive toxicogenomics. Predictive toxicogenomics was the holy grail of safety assessment, probably around 2000, about a decade ago. Everybody thought toxicogenomics was going to save us. And in fact, it hasn't worked out. But what's surprising is how many people are using it from a mechanistic point of view and how often it's used. I was actually shocked at how often that comes up. And then last but not least, there should be no surprise, toxicity biomarkers continues and has in every one of our surveys to be an area that people show interest in and are developing or addressing in some way in their organizations. And then the other question is where are you actually going to put your money? So, there's one question to say what you're interested in. The other question is where you're actually going to invest. And the way we address that question is where are you going to put in assessment resources, meaning money and staff time. And you don't necessarily get the same answers, I have to say. So the three-dimensional human tissue models came out number one. It was something that almost every company said, we're going to evaluate that in some way this year. There was, of course, a lot of divergence on which technologies they were going to pursue and how they were going to pursue it, but it was an area that clearly has caught people's imagination. And I would include in that co-cultures as well. I think people see co-cultures as kind of a variant of the three-dimensional model. And of course, assays to detect risk of idiosyncratic liver toxicity. What's new there? I think it's been high on people's list for a long time, and I think is currently, as yet, still the biggest unrequited, whatever it is, need in the industry. We asked people, if I could solve one problem for you tomorrow, what would it be? And this one comes up at the top of the list most of the time. Mechanistic predictive toxicomas, we already been to that. And what I thought was really kind of interesting, so you remember on the best practices, I said systems toxicology tools, they don't seem to be on anybody's radar, but last year they were actually on the radar in terms of this is something we actually going to spend resources to evaluate. So it's not being used, but it has reached a level of interest where people said, well, we are actually going to look at it. We did not expect a big difference in the level of activity of technology evaluation in 2011. There was a trend maybe to increase the spending, but overall, between 2010, 2011, and frankly, we see the same kind of responses every year we've done it. Is, yeah, we're probably going to do a little more this year, even though we have reduced staff, just because we think this may be an area where we can gain some effectiveness or efficiencies with reduced staff. So, in fact, they may be smaller organizations, but their level of effort in technology evaluation is not shrinking as fast as their staff is anyway. On average, across the industry, people did 5.7 new technology evaluations in 2010, but there was a big variance in that between 0 and 20 per company. And I actually have to say there are some major companies out there that evidently do not believe in new technology, do very few new technology companies, but some other companies, including some very small companies, make a huge effort that really believe technology. So that number of technology evaluations that you do per year is not at all correlated to the size of the company. It was pretty surprising. And then last but not least, from a business perspective, the average technology evaluation took some 20 weeks, or roughly a half a year, but with a very broad distribution. Many people reported technology evaluations that went 14, 16 months, or well over a year. So when we ask how they thought about their technology evaluation process, are there ways to improve the technology evaluation process? And by far the biggest answer people got was it's too expensive. We're spending too much time and money on these technology evaluations. We'd really like to see some efficiencies or some better way of evaluating a technology such that we can judge its value to us. But the second factor, which actually given my time as a manager at Roche, I have to say I identified with, was, well, we do this, we spend a lot of money, we spend 40 weeks doing the evaluation, and in the end we have a lot of data, but we can't make any decisions because it's not really clear to us what the value is or what happened. So they really wanted technology evaluations to be, or at least there was a segment within that group that said we really need to be better at making technology evaluations into a decision-making process, not just a data generation process. And last but not least, I did want to get back to this, probably the most significant change in the year-to-year was the rapid and sudden rise in systems toxicology as a relevant something people were going to evaluate. I'm not exactly sure, even to this day, what people intend to do with systems toxicology tools or how they plan on integrating them in, but it was so surprising last year to see that there was this interest and desire to evaluate the value of systems toxicology tools and see where they may be applicable. So I am going to try and wrap this up now with a couple of summary slides. I think I said all earlier, one of the really strong outcomes of the survey was the preeminent place that these toxicoinformatics tools have been put into in terms of early discovery across the industry. So that people do use these tools, including regulatory agencies, that they do use them for decision making and or evaluation, and there is some, I don't know, I'm going to call it some level of confidence that these tools are providing value relative to their cost and effort. As I said, the increase in high-content screening tools has become fairly obvious, and I think if we were to redo that survey today, we'd find it being done at the majority of companies. Systems toxicology tools I've already talked about. They're not widely used, but they are being evaluated.